Hey everybody, you know what time it is. It is Sunday morning, which means it's time for NHL Games of the Week, where I look ahead at the upcoming week in the NHL and pick out what I think will be the best games this week. Before we get into the video, I just quickly want to remind everyone to please give this video a thumbs up and hit that like button. That greatly helps out the channel. And if you're new, please hit that subscribe button and follow along for all my hockey content this season and all year round. So let's get into it here. There are a ton of games on my list this week. This is a great week for the NHL. Some incredible matchups. Honestly, I could have put even more games in this, but I didn't have any room left on the board. I barely fit all of these to begin with. So let's get into it because this is a great week for sure. So starting with today, Sunday the 17th, we have Calgary versus Vegas. There's only 2 games today, but Calgary versus Vegas is going to be a great matchup. Division rivals. Both teams kind of off to mediocre starts, right around 500 after being very good last year, obviously. Both teams have been a bit disappointing. So, I think this is going to be a big game for the standings and as far as the division goes. And, it's obviously an interdivisional matchup between two teams that I think play each other very hard. Moving on to tomorrow, the 18th, we have none. There are also only 2 games tomorrow. Neither one of them stands out to me, but that's okay because Tuesday, the 19th, we have a boatload. I probably could have added even more, but New York Islanders versus the Pittsburgh Penguins. They play twice this week. We'll talk about them again later, but obviously divisional matchup, rivalry game, teams that met in the playoffs in the first round last year, and the Islanders are obviously off to an incredible start. Pittsburgh trying to get by without Sidney Crosby, still finding ways to get wins. Should be a very good Metropolitan Division game, and that's going to be a fun one for sure. Winnipeg versus Nashville. Winnipeg is actually ahead of Nashville in the standings right now. The Predators have been another team that I think have been kind of disappointing to start this season. They're decent, but they're not looking great. Like I thought they would be a great team this year. Winnipeg is playing a lot better than I expected them to, given all that they lost this past offseason, especially defensively. I don't know if that holds up over the course of the whole season, but so far so good for the Winnipeg Jets. And obviously, Winnipeg and Nashville in general are just huge rivals with each other, and every time they play, it's a very interesting and fun game to watch. And lastly, for Tuesday, Edmonton versus San Jose. Obviously, we know about the Sharks at this point. The terrible start. Much better as of late, pulling themselves up the standings. Edmonton, surprisingly, one of the best teams out west this year. Still at the top of the Pacific Division. They've had a very good year so far. Surprisingly good. Draisaitl and McDavid are absolutely on fire. So division game, teams that don't like each other very much, should be a lot of fun to watch between Edmonton and San Jose. Moving over to Wednesday, the 20th, only a couple of games that night, but they're both solid matchups. Ottawa versus Montreal in an Atlantic Division showdown. Ottawa's not good. They're not going to make the playoffs, but they've been a lot better than I thought they were going to be. I thought they would be a bottom of the league, terrible team that wins like 1 out of every 10 games, and that's not been the case at all for Ottawa this year. They've got more wins than I expected them to. They're playing Montreal, who's also off to a great start this year. I mean, Montreal is off to a very good start this year. That's a Canadian rivalry, division rivalry, should be a fun one despite Ottawa not being the greatest. And also that night, Washington versus the New York Rangers, which is the game that I will be streaming on NBCSN. Washington, can't say enough about how Washington started this season. A lot of teams have been disappointing. Washington has not. They have come out and been absolutely dominant to start this year. Rangers, kind of a roller coaster season so far. They've had some rough stretches. They've had some very good stretches. This is a huge test, obviously, for New York going against the best team in the Eastern Conference. And so far, who I would say has probably been the best team in the league to start this season in the Capitals. Moving on now to Thursday, the 21st. There's again an absolute boatload of games, great games on the 21st. I could have had even more, but I stopped it at like 6. Buffalo versus Boston. First meeting between those two teams this year. Huge test for the Buffalo Sabres to see if they're for real or not. Bruins, big time injury issues right now, but still finding ways to get points. Haven't won many games lately, but they're not losing in regulation either, and they're still scrapping their way to picking up points and holding a lead in the Atlantic Division. Pittsburgh versus the New York Islanders play again for the second time this week. This time it's in New York. Everything that I said about the first matchup applies to the second. Great division rivalry and teams that met in the playoffs last year. Philadelphia versus Carolina, two of those teams that I think are, on the cusp of being in the playoffs. That's an important divisional game there between two teams. Probably I would say, looking at the Metro Division, only one of those two teams is probably going to make the playoffs this year, Philly or Carolina. So I know it's early in the season and the playoff spot's not on the line yet, but that's still a really good matchup between teams that I think are going to be fighting it out all year long for a playoff spot in the East. Colorado versus Minnesota. Obviously, Minnesota's not very good this year, but divisional game. Anytime those Central Division teams meet up, it's usually a really fun game to watch and a solid physical matchup. Colorado, despite all the injuries, still finding ways to win games. That should be a good one. And Winnipeg versus Dallas, again, divisional matchup. Dallas has been absolutely on fire recently, ripping off wins left and right, pulled themselves right out of the bottom of the standings after a really disappointing start. And now they are looking like a one of the better teams out west, like I think a lot of people thought they would be heading into the season. Winnipeg, already talked about them and how surprisingly good they've been. That should be a great matchup between teams, very close to each other in the standings. And finally, San Jose versus Vegas. Best rivalry in the NHL. Doesn't get any better than that. Already their third time playing each other this season, which kind of sucks because that means they only play one more time the rest of the year. But great rivalry matchup. San Jose's been playing a whole lot better as of recent. Vegas has gone the other way and is really struggling right now. So that will be an interesting game to watch and should be a very, very exciting one. Moving on to Friday the 22nd, we have New Jersey versus Pittsburgh, divisional game. They just played last week. Now they're playing again this week. New Jersey actually beat the Penguins last week, so we'll see now in Pittsburgh if Pittsburgh can get revenge for that. But again, divisional game rivals should be fun to watch. And the final day, Saturday, November 23rd, we have the New York Rangers versus Montreal Canadiens. Again, those are two teams that I think are going to be fun to watch play each other. Montreal off to a good start. The Rangers, like I said, roller coaster season so far. Good test again for New York against Montreal to see, just where they're at as far as them as a team. Nashville versus St. Louis. Again, huge Central Division showdown. Supposed to be two of the top teams in the Central Division, although Nashville's been a little disappointing so far. But again, defending Stanley Cup champs versus a huge rival in the Nashville Predators. That should be an awesome game to watch. Chicago versus Dallas. Again, Central Division, like I said, these teams play each other. It is so much fun. And Dallas has been really, really good lately. Chicago starting to kind of get things on the right track a little bit. Not looking great, but starting to get better. And I think that will be a fun one to watch. In the final game, Edmonton versus Vegas. Again, Pacific Division. Vegas, who I thought was going to win the Pacific Division, but kind of struggling so far, versus Edmonton, who is currently leading the Pacific Division. The Oilers are off to a great start this year. So divisional game, not as good as San Jose versus Vegas, but Edmonton versus Vegas is a pretty darn good matchup as well, and should be a lot of fun. So those are the games of the week this week. There are a lot of them. This is a great week for the NHL. Hopefully you get the chance to watch some of these and and they're going to be a lot of fun. I know I'll be watching as many as I can. With that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.